Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today it is Poetry Thursday, a wonderful day to talk about all the poetry that exists in the world. Sometimes I forget or just don't want to post a video on here, but do not think that I am not reading poetry in the interim. So today I want to talk about a poet that I've talked about on this channel before, in a poem about a tragic event that occurred in the recent past. I am referring to When the World as We Knew It Ended by Joy Harjo. As I said before, I've talked about Joy Harjo on this channel, but for those who don't know, Joy Harjo is a poet who's been writing for like decades now, since the 70s even. She is a member of the Muskogee Nation, and she frequently touches upon indigenous themes as well as feminist themes in her work. She writes poetry, anthologies, literary criticism, as well as children's stories, which I really want to examine on Short Story Tuesday sometimes. So I'll have to keep an eye out for that. Joy Harjo is a pretty fascinating writer, as well as a pretty fascinating musician. I had the joy, as I said in the last video I featured about her, I had the honor, the joy of seeing her play live when she came and talked about the indigenous experience in the United States. So definitely someone worth checking out, and I strongly urge you to go and look at her work because it's always high quality. So without further ado, let's talk about this poem. I will read the poem and then do a brief analysis of it, and we will move on from there. When the world as we knew it ended. We were dreaming on an occupied island at the farthest edge of a trembling nation when it went down. 2 towers rose up from the east island of commerce and touched the sky. Men walked on the moon. Oil was sucked dry by 2 brothers. Then it went down, swallowed by a fire dragon, by oil and fear, eaten whole. It was coming. We had been watching since the eve of the missionaries in their long and solemn clothes to see what would happen. We saw it from the kitchen window over the sink as we made coffee, cooked rice, and potatoes, enough for an army. We saw it all as we changed diapers and fed the babies. We saw it through the branches of the knowledge tree, through the snags of stars, through the sun and storms from our knees as we bathed and washed the floors. The conference of the birds warned us as they flew over destroyers in the harbor, parked there since the first takeover. It was by their song and talk we knew when to rise, when to look out the window to the commotion going on, the magnetic field thrown off by grief. We heard it, the racket in every corner of the world, as the hunger for war rose up in those who would steal to be president, to be king or emperor, to own the trees, stones, and everything else that moved about the earth, inside the earth, and above it. We knew it was coming, tasted the winds who gathered intelligence from each leaf and flower, from every mountain, sea, and desert, from every prayer and song, all over this tiny universe floating in the skies of infinite being. And then it was over. This world we had grown to love for its sweet grasses, for the many-colored horses and fishes, for the shimmering possibilities while dreaming. But then there were the seeds to plant and the babies who needed milk and comforting. And someone picked up a guitar or ukulele from the rubble and began to sing about the light flutter, the kick beneath the skin of the earth we felt there, beneath us. A warm animal, a song being born between the legs of her, a poem. And so that was When the World as We Knew It Ended by Joy Harjo. A pretty sad poem. You can feel the grief there, but also a pretty hopeful poem as you near the end. And so what is Joy Harjo talking about in this poem? Well, you can gather from context clues. First, this poem was published in 2002. Next, she's talking about towers rising up on an East Island that was once occupied or is currently being occupied. And so what we can gather from that poem is she's talking about September 11, 2001, when the World Trade Center was attacked. And basically describing how the entire world has changed in a fit of violence. But what's interesting to me in this poem is how she relates this back to indigenous individuals. She says, "We had been watching since the eve of the missionaries in their long and solemn clothes to see what would happen. We saw it from the kitchen window over the sink." She refers to destroyers and planes flying over, like very violent, but it's clear she's referring to the colonialism that took place that resulted in the displacement of Native Americans, of a variety of different tribes losing their homes here and there and everywhere. And so she's noting that, like, maybe for regular Americans, white Americans especially, they couldn't see the World Trade Center attacks happening. But for Native Americans, they might have seen it coming because they saw that the U.S. government was perpetuated on a system of violence. And sooner or later, that violence is going to, boomerang back upon them. And that's what happened here. She's not saying by any means that these people deserve to die. She's mourning those people. What she's saying is that, like, this is what happens, like, when you build atop blood and violence. Like, it doesn't end well for you. And so it's a time of mourning, and it's a time of pointing out that like, this is what happens eventually, and it's something that needs to change. And so the world as we knew it has ended, and now we have to confront these truths, which it really seems like post 9/11, like, we didn't confront those truths. Like, there were a lot of people who were like, this is bad, but the people in power chose to continue with colonialism through the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And another interesting element of this poem is the ending, where she says, "But then there were the seeds to plant and the babies who needed milk and comforting. And someone picked up a guitar or a ukulele from the rubble and began to sing about the light flutter that the kick beneath the skin of the earth we felt there." And so at the end of the poem, it feels quite different than what was really happening in 2001, 2002, because in the news media and, in pop culture, people were saying, we got to avenge those people who died at 9/11. But that's not what Joy Harjo is saying. She's not calling for war or more violence. She's saying we have to comfort those who are sad in this time, that we have to plant seeds and try to strive for a better future. Which is excellent. It really speaks to me here that, like, in a time where so many people were calling for violence and saying we need war to address these deaths, Joy Harjo is over here saying maybe we don't need that death. Maybe we should consider comforting those and striving to make a better life. So maybe this doesn't happen down the road later. A lot of things to consider there. Anyway, those are my thoughts on When the World as We Knew It Ended by Joy Harjo. A pretty magnificent poem, very touching. It really called to me as I was reading it, and so I wanted to share it with you today. If you read this poem before, you simply want to comment on it, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think. Let's have a discussion and talk about Joy Harjo. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this poem, as well as Joy Harjo, because more people should know about her. She's a pretty wonderful person. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and we told you so kind of travels. Farewell.